Welcome to the Do You Mind podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Zimmerman. This podcast is dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of consciousness, exploring how internal and external forces shape our self-awareness, and understanding how our experiences define a reality. Guests will appear regularly and share their expertise on various topics. Subscribe and stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations that explore the deeper questions about life and consciousness. Oh my gosh, I think I'm on like 4 to 6 shots of espresso. I lost track. It's getting crazy in here, folks. And that is a great segue into today's episode, which is about the 7 Hermetic Principles. We're talking about Hermetic philosophy. I recently did a poll on my IG page and asked, hey, what do you guys want me to talk about? What's some topics you guys are interested in? And the laws of the universe was one of the options, and I got some hits there. So, fascinating topic. I love talking about it. I think it's I know it's profoundly changed my life and many other people's that I've collected their stories over time. And I think a lot of people talk about this stuff and don't even realize it. It's kind of the master key, as it is said in the book, The Kybalion, where a lot of this stuff is outlined, that this is the master key to understanding a lot of different areas of knowledge. Occult knowledge, I think, is the words they use, and occult just means hidden knowledge. That has been around since ancient times, thousands of years. It has been taught widely, and then would go underground where it wouldn't be heard of for a long period of time over the many centuries of time, and then would resurface again and go back under, which is an example of the principle of rhythm, which we'll get into in a little bit. So here's my understanding of the 7 Hermetic Principles of Hermetic philosophy and its impacts on basically our consciousness and understanding what's going on in the world and what's going on inside of us. So the background of Hermeticism real quick. We're not actually sure how far back it goes. There are a lot of people that speculate that the main figure of Hermetic philosophy is Hermes Trismegistus, which means Hermes thrice great, and that he was the master of masters in ancient Egypt, where he taught basically alchemy, early psychology, and other topics for the first time ever. Like, the world had never seen it before. And he was deified by specific cultures. The Egyptians deified him as Thoth. So he has connections with Thoth. There's a lot of people that believe that he was Thoth, if Thoth was an actual being, that's an interesting discussion in itself. The Romans deified him as Hermes. So the story about him is basically all of the masters from all over the world, from each culture, from every corner of the earth, would come to Egypt to study under him and learn under him, and then they would go back to their cultures and spread that knowledge and wisdom to their people. And these laws are to be considered, or are considered, universal, and that they apply to pretty much everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. This is kind of just like the way the universe works is how these are proposed. And I found a lot of this stuff to be true myself from just doing thought experiments, testing the validity of these laws out in day-to-day life. A lot of us understand or have heard of the law of attraction. Law of attraction is a secondary law that comes from the law of vibration. The law of vibration is the 3rd principle in Hermetic philosophy. So we're going to go through these and the idea behind them and how they've influenced our culture and continue to. So that's a little bit of the history on it. So the 7 Hermetic Principles. So let's go into the first one. The first one is the most important one. It's the principle of mentalism. And that's the idea that the all is mind, the universe is mental. And this is a pretty heavy one. There needs to be a lot of evidence, because throughout most of pretty much over the last, since like the 1500s, since the scientific method has been really the powerhouse here, and materialism was the school of thought where things are made of materials, of matter. And that is the physical world that we experience, and that's all there is, because we don't really have evidence for anything beyond that, spiritually, things like that. A lot of the things that religions teach and have been teaching for thousands of years is hard to back up with science because you can't really measure it. So it's therefore, you can't say it's true if you can't really measure it. So there's this huge gap, and people talk about the God of the gaps argument, which is, you can't just jump and say, oh, it's God. That's why you can't explain it. So it's like unraveling that, because that's a huge influence in Western culture and has been for centuries. But this has been around for a long time, and it continues to resurface and have a huge sway. And it's the idea that everything that happens has a mental origin. The universe itself is a mental construct of the all. And some practical examples of this is visualization techniques and mindfulness and thought control, which can be achieved through daily meditation practices and affirmations and mental programming. So to reflect on this idea with certain questions, it's like, how can you use your thoughts to shape your reality? In what ways does your mental state influence your daily life? And I was looking up the whole argument between materialism and mentalism, which I believe spawned from a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. That matter is the basis of all existence, or is it mind? Is it thoughts themselves that construct reality, and that we're just living in this big giant mind? It's kind of hard to wrap our heads around, but if we look at NDEs, I go to near-death experiences, and that is the main argument for mentalism, because like I said, we can't measure this stuff. It's very difficult to understand unseen forces, and it takes a lot of research and just finding the right tools to measure this stuff. But we have a lot of evidence through firsthand accounts of what people experience when they are clinically dead, or I think that's the right term, where you're like, in medical terms, you're considered dead. Like, you have no heartbeat, you're brain dead, no activity, and you come back, right? This is the case for many people. You come back and you're alive again, you're resuscitated, or you're brought back to life somehow, and you remember stuff, you experience stuff, you've experienced stuff you couldn't possibly have experienced because you didn't have any sensory acuity. Your senses weren't working because your brain wasn't able to process the information. So how could you possibly have sensed anything and experienced, or seen, or heard, or tasted, or touched, right? But what has been reported through, regardless of the culture this person came from, it's been in all these different cultures, different ages, different creeds, whatever, that they're reporting very similar things. That, they saw their body, they left their body, they saw it, things like that. And they would report that the doctor did specific things during a surgery or something like that, in some cases where people died during surgery and then came back. And a lot of this stuff is recorded. You can go look it up. Just look up near-death experience cases, or you can even look up what are the arguments for mentalism. And NDEs are the first thing that typically comes up, because that's kind of the only evidence that we have that we can prove, which you can't even really prove. It's just firsthand accounts. You can't really measure it. You just say like, well, this is apparently something that's happening if we are to believe these people. But a lot of times it's like, these people have no reason to lie, no reason to deceive. They're just sharing what they experienced. And so the idea here is that it's consciousness. Your consciousness survives your body after you die. That consciousness doesn't necessarily come from the brain. It's non-local. It's like you are a receiver. Your brain is a receiver of consciousness. So if you suffer brain damage, then your receiver has been damaged, not the producer of consciousness. Not what is creating it, but what's receiving it. So we're like little antennas receiving broadcasts, is one way to look at it. And this plugs into the whole idea sphere, that ideas aren't really original. All these ideas exist. Everything exists already. It's just you pulling that information or downloading the information. And you might hear people say that sometimes, like, oh, I received a download. I got a download from the universe. And that's essentially what they're talking about, is that they were vibing on a certain level, and we'll get into vibration in a little bit, that gave them access to information that is, it's not like, it's hard for us to understand this, but it's like Wi-Fi. Like, how do you get Wi-Fi? It's literally a frequency through the air that is picked up, similar to a radio station, that data can travel through, and then you receive the signal and you process it, and then you have communication. That's the same idea with consciousness, is what this is getting at, is that all of this is essentially one conscious mind, and we are all just aspects of it. Everything that exists is an aspect of the great contemplation of mind. And to truly understand this stuff is very difficult. I don't really, we don't have this stuff all ironed out yet, but this is just what was taught for thousands of years. And when we apply it and look at everything, everything can fit into this. And it is, we could say it's a working title, because I don't think anything, is a lid on things, so to speak. Like, okay, we're done. We figured out the universe. All right, now let's just all sip some pina coladas on the beach. It is a constant unraveling and understanding of how this stuff applies, what this stuff means, and the continual search for truth and understanding this whole argument of like, why is this important in the first place? Well, it's like, am I just existing? Are we here to just reproduce? Is it just so the species can continue? And what's even the point of that? If time buries all in oblivion, right? What's the point of all of this? If we extrapolated that the universe is going to continue to separate from itself and it's going to become cold and freeze over, because everything's going to move away from everything as it expands. And everything's going to die out anyway. What's the point, right? That's the big picture argument here. It's a big picture thing going on. So a lot of people, they can derive meaninglessness from this, like nothing really matters. What's the point? So why live up to moral standards, or ethics are overrated, things like that, Being a good person's overrated because who cares? Because it doesn't have any effect in the long scheme of things. So not go too far into that. Well, I guess to make my point, this approach would give meaning, right? It gives yourself a connection to, or it creates a path towards connecting with the universe. It creates a path towards like, hey, there's something bigger going on here that I'm a part of, and I don't really understand all of it, but I know it's there because there's some things that are indicative of it. There's things pointing towards it. I'm not going to make a God of the gaps jump here to conclude and speak in absolutes, but understand that, hey, there's some patterns going on. There's some laws at hand here. And another example of that is like randomness, like people that believe in randomness or not, or that's all by design. And one of the laws is the law of cause and effect. And if you can't see, like if you don't see the cause and effects of something, if you think something's random, it's just a law not recognized. It's just like you not recognizing the law of cause and effect. But to not go too far and jump around too much, because these all are very connected. The main one is that the universe is mental and that everything is mind. So what the masters do in this, the masters of Hermeticism, is that they employ, or they use the tactic or the skill of mental transmutation. And what's interesting is psychology actually calls this pattern interruption now, but for thousands of years it has been known as mental transmutation, and that's where you take something negative and turn it into a positive. That's the most simplest way to describe it. And I've done this myself. I think a lot of us do without realizing it or know what it's called, but it's a mental technique. And it is a very beneficial one. And we'll talk about vibration here in a second, but it has to do with vibration. So mental transmutation is your ability to turn lead into gold, so to speak. Like taking a lead thought, or a thought that's not constructive, it's negative, it's disempowering, and then transmute that into a positive thought that's constructive and actually helps you on your way, on your path, gets you further along the journey of growth and understanding. So this is what was taught. This is what's coming back. It's surfacing again. Like I said, it surfaced as pattern interruption, which a lot of thought leaders are teaching in the personal development field. They have been for the last century. I think in the early 20th century is when this stuff resurfaced. So that's mentalism. I'd love to go deeper on this, but I want to move into the principle of correspondence. And that is as above, so below. As below, so above. This is the mirror principle. And this is the idea that the world is a mirrored reflection of what's going on internally with you. Because you're looking at life through a lens, you're perceiving through a lens of what things mean to you, and that is dictating your experience. Here's another way to look at it. There's a harmony, agreement, and correspondence between the different planes of existence. Microcosm and macrocosm relationships. And that's observing patterns in nature, studying fractals and symmetry in the universe, things like that. And the idea here is that we map our personal behaviors to larger social patterns. We draw parallels between personal challenges and universal laws. And that's the whole mirror principle. Like this one thing that's going on with me is a representation of what's going on a grander scale. They're related. I'm not just some isolated thing happening in the universe, but it's connected to this larger thing that when I zoom out, I see the forest for the trees, but the trees are a part of the forest, right? That's the microcosm and macrocosm relationship. So, yeah, it's correspondence. Things will link up, and this also has to do with vibration. Like if you have two pianos in a room fairly close to each other, and I hit C sharp on the piano, and it starts to vibrate the string, right? If you go look at the other piano that wasn't touched, the C sharp string is vibrating. It is syncing up. It is corresponding with the other one because it's corresponding. It's connected. And you feel this a lot when, another example of this is like in society or not society, but like in your relations, in your day-to-day. When you meet somebody new and you just like vibe with somebody really well. You're like, wow, like I really get along with this person. Or like when you're trying to create rapport with somebody. And the science behind this is like when you act like the person that you're trying to build rapport with, you will build rapport with them much sooner because they see themselves in you. So you guys are considered to be vibrating at the same frequency, or you guys are in alignment with each other. And you see yourself in the other person. So that is an example of correspondence again. And another example of this as well is, say we're in a car and we're driving down the road, and I'm checking, the instruments of the vehicle to see where my oil level is at, my tire pressure, my gas, things like that. And I noticed, I need some gas. And you're in the passenger seat, and you're a passenger. You're not really thinking about operating the vehicle. You're thinking about your stomach. Your stomach hurts. You're hungry. And we're driving down the road, and I'm now looking, since I'm thinking about the gas level, I'm looking at all the gas stations. Where's a gas station? And that's the only thing that I can see, because that's the only thing I'm looking for. So I notice, okay, anything to do with vehicles, anything that looks like a gas station is what I'm looking for. That's all I'm going to see. You, on the other hand, you're looking for restaurants, and that's all you're noticing and seeing is all the restaurants that we're going by. Even though both are available to us and are there, we're not conscious of them unless we're actually focusing on them. So that's how you will experience the universe based on the lens that you have, that you're looking through. It's how you're perceiving things, like what you're conscious of, what you're focusing on. That's the saying, energy flows where attention goes. Because you're focusing or putting energy on seeing those things and recognizing those things in the environment, in the universe. It'll be shown back to you. And that's the other saying, seek and you shall find. That's that idea. Is that when you're putting energy on focusing on that thing will be presented to you much more because it's what you're looking for. It's what you're noticing. Your brain is deleting all the other stuff because it's not concerned with all that stuff. And I say brain, but you could take a step even further and say consciousness, because we are not our thoughts, we are the awareness behind our thoughts. That's the whole spiritual beings having a biological experience. That's taking the mentalism approach instead of the materialist approach. That everything is made up of consciousness, not matter. And when you look at quantum physics and you get real down nitty-gritty with what happens on the molecular level, we notice that particles behave very weird. Particles are shifting from waves to particles and popping in and out of existence. You have antimatter, things like that. We're not really sure where they're going. And then you also have the conscious observer experiment, where when we actually observe something, it changes. The particles behave differently when we observe them, as opposed to us not observing them. So that is understanding the power of focus and consciousness and how we can wield that, and that's why we're creative beings, and we can create whatever life we want without breaking the laws, obviously. Based on what we're focusing on, our conscious ability to continue to put energy into what it is we want to create. And this plugs into why, so many businesses fail or relationships or things like that, because we want variety, we want new things. It's very hard to stay focused on the same thing because it gets redundant, and it gets repetitive, and we get familiar. That's the whole familiarity thing. We get bored of stuff after a while, and we want something new. So if you can stay focused on something for a long period of time, say 10 years, imagine what you can build. If every day you were focused on this one thing for 10 years and your conscious effort was placed on it, imagine what you could build, as opposed to your consciousness being scattered every day to the wind to these different things that you're kind of like, ooh, shiny red ball, but in different forms, in different ways. It would be difficult to build something because your consciousness is scattered, and that's the idea there. So the universe is corresponding to how you're deciding to show up. And I think it's a neutral in that regard, but it can be friendly as well, because it's like, okay, well, it's like place your order. Ask intelligently. What is it that you want, and what are you willing to do to get it? Meaning, are you committed to this, and are you consciously going to put the effort behind it consistently over and over and over again to create the repetition, right? Which now we're going into frequency, because that's what that is cycles. When you create the cycle of doing this over and over and over again, that's the frequency you're operating at, and that's your level of being. So that's, I did bring a little bit of vibration into this, so that's correspondence mostly, or at least how I understand it. And that's looking at the larger patterns to see how they're reflected in our personal life, and understanding how can we understand this to help in problem solving. And the psychology way of looking at this is pattern interruption. So it's recognizing the patterns of conscious thought that you have a cycle of doing, or a habit of doing, interrupting that, and then creating the pattern or the habit that you want, because you're going to start existing at that frequency because you're consciously focusing on it all the time. Next up is the third principle of vibration. And so, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. So everything is in constant motion and vibration. Different states of matter and energy correspond to different rates of vibration. And that's what we were talking about before. So quick examples like colors. All these different colors that we see are all different vibrations. If you change the vibration, it changes the color. Same thing with things that are moving. Things that are moving at different vibrations. And we can use the example of the tire or the wheel. When a car is not moving, we can see that the tires aren't moving, right? Like something that spins. When that thing picks up speed and starts spinning and at a faster rate, its frequency picks up, right? The cycles of how fast it's spinning. Have you ever seen it go so fast where it looks like it's not moving? When you're maybe a kid as a passenger in a car and you're kind of looking at the other cars and you notice the wheels are spinning at such a rate that they almost, like they kind of stop and then actually look like they're going backwards because they're spinning so quickly. That's vibration at work. That's how vibration changes what we experience. So this whole mental transmutation thing, when you're, I guess to get into it, it's like feelings. We can use feelings as another example. Feelings are different names for vibrations. If I'm sad, that's a vibration that I'm in, that I'm feeling because I thought it, then I felt it, and now I'm in that vibration. Thoughts produce feelings because thoughts are vibrations themselves. They produce vibrations. And we can measure this on EEGs, that there's different brain waves. So depending on what you're thinking, it's going to create how you're feeling. If you do this over and over again, you basically created a frequency because you're creating a cycle of doing it. And this becomes your behavior, which becomes your character, which becomes your destiny. That's the saying, right? Thoughts become feelings, become behaviors, become character, becomes destiny. So it all starts with your thoughts, and this plugs back into the whole mentalism thing, like everything is deriving from consciousness ultimately. And energy is responding to this. So mental transmutation would be taking, a sad thought and making it happy. Like, oh, I don't want to feel sad anymore. And you're like, I'm aware that I'm feeling sad because something in my environment may have triggered it. Maybe I heard a sad note on a piano, like a minor chord, which are typically associated with creating feelings of sadness or somber. And I want to be happy. So it's like you think of something that made you laugh. So we can do this right now. Like if you sit here and you actually think of something that makes you sad, what's something in your life that you're sad about? Maybe it's the death of a pet or a loved one, or when you were down and out on your luck, and maybe you're homeless, sleeping out of your car. Maybe, it was that time when you weren't sure when your next meal was going to be. I guess they're considered dark times, right? Life storms. Depending on how you view that, you can have a totally specific type of experience because maybe that was very sad, right? Other people may transmute that and say, you know what, actually, I'm glad that happened. Actually, I'm very happy that happened because it taught me a lesson that I would have not have ever possibly understood or known if I hadn't gone through that. And it got me exactly where I am today, and I'm really happy who I am as a person. I love myself. And I wouldn't be where I'm at with my understanding if that hadn't happened. So that's one way of transmuting right there, an experience from during the time. At the time, it was terrible. It was horrible. It was very uncomfortable. It was unpleasant. There was suffering involved. But then in hindsight, you look at it, you can transmute it. And, even though it's traumatic, you can transmute it into something that's useful and that is positive. So it's taking lead and turning it into gold. And this is happening on vibration because thoughts are vibration. So when you change the meaning of something, you've transmuted it. And your ability to do this it's pretty much the unlock of all unlocks in terms of having a good life, I think, from my experience and what I've collected. It's how you have a good life, is being able to transmute this stuff and what it means to you. And it's not ignoring it. You still have to feel it to heal it. But it's like feeling intelligently. It's like your emotional intelligence. Instead of throwing a pity party, you're like, well, what can I learn from this? What is this trying to teach me? Or what is this presenting to me that I can use to help not only myself but other people? So sound therapy and its effects on the body is another good way to look at this. And understanding, like we were talking about a second ago, understanding the energy levels in physical and emotional states. What state are you in? What state do you want to be in? And how can you transmute that through thought and understanding? You can choose to be sad and you can choose to be happy just by recalling certain memories. Sound is an interesting thing. Apparently it's, if you go into cymatics, sound is what is holding everything together. Vibration is the basis of form and shape. And if you want to know more about that, go check out cymatics. What's ways to utilize the principle of vibrations to practice mindfulness and tune into the vibrational state of your environment? Let's check in the vibes, read the room. Be mindful of the room, the vibe. Also experimenting with different types of music or sounds that affect mood and energy. This one's, I think, very understandable for a lot of people. Like I was saying earlier, when you hear a minor chord, typically it's associated, like you feel somber or you feel sad. It's very emotional, as opposed to hearing a C chord or C major. And movies use this stuff, commercials, they understand human behavior and psychology. So you'll hear, they specifically sound engineer specific pieces of content to invoke emotional responses because they understand that these vibrations actually invoke a specific consciousness that we experience. So, reflective questions regarding this that we can reflect on to understand this more is: how do different vibrations affect your physical state and your emotional states? And what techniques can you use to raise your vibrational frequency? Mental transmutation. Using music or sounds to change your mood. Meditation, becoming more aware of your thoughts and how they're making you feel. You can catch yourself in these patterns, interrupt them, and then create the ones you want. Principle of polarity, number 4. We're moving on, folks. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Interesting. Okay, what does that mean? Duality exists in everything, and opposites are actually two extremes of the same thing. Understanding and reconciling duality in personal experiences. Okay. And examples of this that is pretty common is yin and yang in Eastern philosophy, and also the emotional spectrum and its management. So it's like sadness and happiness are both emotions, so they exist on the same spectrum. It's just to a different degree. And this is how mental transmutation works, essentially, is like I can transmute because it's on the same pole of like happiness and sadness. Any emotion, right? Emotion is the pole. And so everything has a pole, everything in existence, because duality exists in everything. This is why everything's a half-truth. And when you speak in absolutes, you're ignoring the existence of paradox. And one great example is out of sight, out of mind. The other extreme is distance makes the heart grow fonder. Both of those are true, but they're complete opposites. So they exist on the same pole, just to separate degrees. Like they're on totally different degrees, but it's the same pole. So understanding this is very useful because, what goes up must come down, what grows must die. The sun goes up, the sun falls. One day we're happy, and then the next day we're sad. This can happen on a micro scale and a macro scale, because the principle of correspondence tells us that this stuff is reflective and mirrored in the world. You can see it. It's a pattern. It's a principle. So the way to, you can use the higher laws against the lower laws. I'm not going to get into this too much because I'm still learning this stuff, but when you use mental transmutation, you're actually using the higher laws against the lower laws. And we're starting to get into the lower principles or laws right now, which is polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. When you use vibration to mentally transmute and understand correspondence is at work here, in the grand scheme of mentalism, or that everything is consciousness, you can start to mitigate the effects of polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. Gender probably not so much, but the other three, cause and effect mostly. So yeah, identify and balance polarities within yourself, and that's what we were talking about earlier. So it's like love and hate, joy and sorrow. Understanding mental transmutation can move you out of that stuff, and you move to a different degree on that pole. And practice dialectic thinking to find balance and harmony. So that's, understanding and having contrast between these two things and seeing, okay, well, like, what are the parameters of this pole of experience, or this pole of emotion, the range of emotions that I can experience, and how are my thoughts contributing to that? So in what areas of your life do you experience polarity? How can you use this principle of polarity to achieve emotional balance? Mental transmutation. So fifth principle is the principle of rhythm. We talked about it a little bit. It goes hand in hand with polarity. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. And this is the natural cycle and rhythm of life. Recognizing and working with the ebb and flow of circumstances is how we can understand this. Everything has an ebb and flow. And we got into this a little bit, like in a given day, you can have something happen, or something that you experience that makes you feel happy, and then something that makes you feel sad. Like you stub your toe, but then somebody gives you a gift, right? So those can affect your energy because you're interacting and placing meaning on the experiences that you have certain ties to. Like this means this, and therefore this. Like I have a programming where, like, if somebody gives me a gift, I receive that as like I am loved, and therefore I'm happy about that. If I stub my toe, it means I wasn't being careful and mindful of my spatial awareness, and that's upsetting because I thought I told myself to be more mindful and aware, so we can get on ourselves and beat ourselves up and get angry. So it's understanding how that can easily happen within a day. Sometimes it transmutes you to a place to where you stub your toe in the beginning of the day and somebody gets your order wrong, and then your loved one doesn't reach out to you, and like that's all you see, that's all you're focusing on, so that's all you're corresponding with, and you're vibrating at that frequency. That's what your consciousness is going to experience. That's what the world's going to reflect back to you. And then, maybe a series of good things start happening. You say, well, my luck has turned. You say luck, but really it's cause and effect. So when you say luck, it's a law not recognized. You're not recognizing cause and effect. There is no randomness. There is no luck, is what this is saying. When we get into the next principle, but I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but rhythm ties into these, because rhythm is going to take us along the poles. We're going to feel sad, and we're going to feel happy, and we're going to feel all these huge range of emotions because it's all available to us. And we have certain triggers the environment will trigger because it's where we have placed meaning. Like, this means this means that. So when it comes up and happens, we execute the behavior that we have habitually been programmed to respond in a certain manner. That's the program. That's the pattern. That's the place that we're corresponding and vibrating at. But you can break these patterns by understanding what's going on. So biorhythms and personal energy cycles are examples of this. Market cycles in economics are examples of this. The rise and fall of civilizations, like Rome had its peak and then its downfall, and then we had the Dark Ages, and then we had the Enlightenment. So you can see it in history itself happening. That's more of a zoomed out perspective. And then if you zoom out even more, you can see the solar system going through periods of turmoil, and then less turmoil, I guess if you want to look at the Earth when it was being bombarded by asteroids and was covered in lava, to where we're at now in an interglacial period or inter-ice age period. We have a lot of peace compared to other parts of the cycle. That is rhythm at hand. So how do you experience the principle of rhythm in your daily life? And what strategies can you use to flow with the natural rhythms instead of against them? Yeah, that's one way to go. Once you become a master, you can start to create your own rhythm. That's when it gets very interesting. Principle 6, the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. This is understanding the law of causation and recognizing the impact of actions and decisions. So, this one's probably the most people are the most familiar with because it translates into other areas of thought. And, analyzing personal and historical events through cause and effect. It's pretty obvious, Karma and the consequences of actions. We see that stuff all the time. And it's like how you're choosing to show up is pretty much what you're going to get because you're causing the effect. If I choose to show up with integrity and with principle and purpose, as opposed to just however I'm feeling in the moment, I'm going to have different effects, right? That's going to affect whatever I'm interacting with differently. If I'm choosing to put effort into something or not, it's going to alter the outcome. So we can see how this is working within our own lives by journaling. We can trace back to the causes of current situations. And we can practice mindfulness in decision making to foresee potential effects. And as a chess player, I'm pretty nerdy about this stuff. I love seeing my next move. What does that next move lead to? And in the game of chess, but also applying to the game of life. I enjoy playing poker as well for the same reasons. It's kind of like, if I know you know that I know that you know, then you're going to do this. It's like foreseeing cause and effect based on the details of something, or what's this road going to lead down? If I decide to take a left at this fork instead of right, where's that going to lead me? What are the potential consequences? Cause and effect, right? Okay. Principle 7, the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. So the presence of masculine and feminine energies are in all aspects of life. The idea here is that we balance and integrate these energies for wholeness. And what Hermeticism has us do is understand gender beyond the physical and biological context, and applying masculine and feminine principles in creativity and problem solving. So, yeah, these are energies. Masculine energy, feminine energy. We all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us. It's similar to yin and yang. Right? So a man can have an unhealthy feminine, or an unhealthy masculine, or a healthy masculine, a healthy feminine. We hear this stuff all the time. What does that mean? Is that you understand these energies at work and how they work, and that you don't neglect them or discard them, but you integrate these energies for wholeness. You balance them out. Like, for example, men, it's not okay to cry. A lot of men are brought up thinking, or like being taught that basically. Like it's weak to cry. And ultimately crying is what? Expressing emotion, or being vulnerable, being open, right? Putting ourselves out there. That's feminine energy. But if a man bottles up his emotions all the time and doesn't express himself, then he creates dis-ease in his body because he's not allowing the flow of the energy. Same thing with masculine. If he's not being decisive and taking action and steering his life in the direction he wants it to go in, taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, right, and protecting the ones he loves, then it is said that he is not in his masculine, right? Both of these are important. Both are necessary. We want to be whole. We want to be integrated. We don't want to be fragmented. We don't want to push our masculine side out and say, like, oh, that's toxic to be that way. Or it's toxic to be, to cry and complain. And yeah, to a certain point, if it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's if you have too much on any of these, if you have too much masculinity or too much energy or feminine and you're not balancing them out, then it's just going to be out of balance. People call it toxic, but really it's just a lack of balance. It's a lack of understanding. There's not a harmony, and it's corresponding, right? Their internal is showing on the external. So it's a matter of understanding and integrating these energies for wholeness. So, how do we apply this to ourselves? What are some exercises we can do to help with the principle of gender and apply this? Explore and balance masculine and feminine traits within yourself. And also creative projects that integrate both principles. And, yeah. This stuff, I think it's the hardest one to understand is gender, because it has been so misconstrued and blown out of proportion and like taken in so many different directions that it does require more study and understanding to see how these two are in effect, but ultimately you need both to create. Both energies are required to create, and that it exists in everything. There is no one or the other. It cannot exist if it is lacking one. It has to have both. Kind of like a battery, right? You have the positive and negative. Negative not necessarily being bad. It's just the word that we were using for a long time, and I think they changed the word to cathode. I can't remember exactly what the word was, but to help people understand. Feminine energy is more like storing, associated with negative ions, like the movement of water, a forest. You hear people talk about forest bathing and Mother Earth. We even associate Mother Earth. Mother Earth is the feminine energy that receives us. And then we call Spirit the Father. We say His or Him, His will, or, He is my Lord, things like that. It's because Spirit penetrates, or the Spirit is the masculine energy that penetrates the I, and the feminine is more me. So the I penetrates the me, but you need both of these to exist. They both work with each other. So yeah, forest baths are great for this. If you want to get more feminine, get in touch with nature. Honestly, get in touch with Mother Earth, the mother energy, and have her receive you and show her some love. Be open to her. If you want to be more masculine, then think more I am going to create this thing. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to penetrate the world with my, not in a way that I'm like, I'm not going to tread on other people, right? But I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to create something for me that I can enjoy because my life matters and I want to make something happen. I want to have an impact in the world. I want to create something beautiful, right? That is a more masculine energy. So I hope this helps understand. This video's gotten pretty long. But this is my understanding of all this stuff, and you can find out more if you go check out the Kybalion. It talks about all this stuff in even more depth than I've just talked about. There's videos on YouTube talking about this stuff. Aubrey Marcus and Robert Edward Grant have a great podcast about this. They speak more into this, even more about the history of Hermes Trismegistus and who he was. Yeah, check it out. Dive deep. Get into it. I firmly believe it is a master key of knowledge to understand a lot of this other stuff. It's been helping me understand a lot. And I do want to create a handbook to understand this stuff even more, and even maybe get into some like meditation rituals, symbolic rituals, some equinox and solstice type rituals to help really embody this stuff and to have it come from thought into physical and create something that's tangible from consciousness to matter and create that complete loop of experience to really impress it firmly upon the mind. So yeah, I hope this helps you guys out understanding this stuff. Definitely dig deeper, do some recreational study on your own to figure out more about this stuff, see how it applies to your life. I think it applies to everything, honestly, and it has been for a long time since I came across this stuff. It hasn't really diminished or gone away or really been challenged much unless you go into the whole materialism versus mentalism conversation, which is fascinating as well. So join in, jump in, and enjoy. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Do You Mind podcast. If you guys like this episode, please share it, like it, comment. Let me know how I'm doing. I do want to grow this channel and reach as many people as possible. So if this had an impact on you, share a little bit of your story so other people can relate. Share it with some friends, people that you think need to hear this stuff. And once again, thank you for your support and stay tuned for more episodes. Take care.